Hey, it's Sarah with Loaves and Dishes, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make an apple pie. So the first thing that I did was peel and cut, I think I used 7 apples. Depending on your pie size and your apple size, you'd want to use between 6 and 8. It's about 1.25 pounds of apples. You can use any kind of apples you want. Traditionally, people use all Granny Smith apples. I like to do kind of a mixture of Granny Smith, and we really like Honeycrisp apples. I just think apple pie should be extra sweet, so I like to add a couple sweet apples in with the Granny Smith as well. But if you prefer all Granny Smith, you can use all Granny Smith. And if you prefer some other kind of apple, you could use those if you would rather use those. It doesn't really matter. I guess apple pie traditionalists might say, oh, you can only use Granny Smith apples. And I mean, you can go by that rule if you want, but it's not necessarily the case. And if you're making this pie for yourself and your family, you can do whatever you want. That is one of the great things about cooking, is that everybody likes different things, and you can use whatever apples you want to use in your apple pie. So that's my soapbox about that. But I'm just coring the apples. I peeled them, and I'm cutting them up into bite-sized pieces. I was just going to do long slices, but I wanted to make sure that the pieces were bite-sized, and I think that's kind of important. The other thing that's important is when you're making these slices is you want to make sure that the slices are very even. That way all of the apples cook evenly when they're when they're being baked. You don't want some pieces of apple that are large that will not cook, and some pieces that are too small that will cook, very quickly. You want to make sure that everything's pretty even. And what I forgot to film was that once I got all my apples in a bowl, I squeezed the juice of 1 lemon over the apples, and I also added the zest of 1 lemon. All this does is it helps brighten up the flavor just a little bit, but also the lemon juice will help keep the apples from turning brown while you're getting everything else ready. So it's not necessary, I guess, but the lemon juice does add a little bit to the flavor. But other than that, it's just for keeping the lemons from turning brown. Or not the lemons, the apples from turning brown. So once I got my apples all cut up, then I started on my pie crust, and I'm just using the Pillsbury pie crust. It comes in a red box. I really recommend those. They're really great. You can make your own pie crust if you would like. I am not about that. I had to do it at a restaurant. Oh my gosh, for the amount of time that I worked there, I made so many pie crusts. I do not like making pie crust now. So I just use the Pillsbury kind. It's so easy. So I just put my bottom crust in and I set that aside. And now in a large bowl, I'm going to mix up my mixture. It's 2 tablespoons of flour, 1/2 cup of white sugar, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and then I'm going to add some spices. You want to do a little bit more cinnamon, so I did a tablespoon of cinnamon, I did 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and I also did 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger. For sure you want to add the cinnamon. The nutmeg is a little less optional, and the ground ginger is the least optional, but I love adding ginger to pies and things. I just think that it really does something to the flavor. And my brown sugar was a little stiff, so I'm just giving that a good mix. You don't have to mix this ahead of time before you add the apples. I just find that it's easier, because once you put the apples in, then it's like you can't mix out the big clumps and stuff. So when you put the apples in, you kind of want to gently mix all of this together. You don't want to bruise your apples or anything like that by mixing it too rough. And you're also going to add about 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. So I'm just going from the sides and then moving the apples towards the center until they're all coated in this sugar, flour, spice mixture. And this is a really important step, but once you get all of this mixed together, you want to set it aside and let it rest for about 10 minutes. What that does is the sugar and all of the spices are going to pull moisture out of the apples, and it's going to make almost like a sauce. And you can kind of see it here as I'm scraping it out. All of that stuff that's dripping out of the bowl, that is basically like apple juice and sugar, and you want all of that in your pie, and it won't necessarily come out while it's baking. More of it will come out while it's baking, more of that moisture, but you want to try and get as much of that like in a goo before you bake it, because it just makes the pie phenomenal. So now I'm taking my top pie crust, and I'm going to do a lattice top. I love the way a lattice